Should the interpreter be voicing this? There's some exciting things that are going to be happening today. What we're going to do is I'm going to combine music and American Sign Language and explain a little bit about how they can go together and how I work with metaphors and with slang and make it visual in American Sign Language. So historically with music, pop music, country music, jazz, rap, different types of music. Sometimes it's at a slow pace and it's easier to follow. And deaf people have been enjoying watching interpretations of those kind of genres of music. But when the music has more slang, faster pace, complexity, metaphor, different needs, it's a little harder. And there are diverse people from all different backgrounds all over the world. And when folks come to the US, if they're struggling with English, they may have more complex access needs. So this kind of linguistic complexity is found also in music, and it can be sort of mind-blowing. And with all of these different genres of music that I just mentioned, there are two that I haven't mentioned. One is hip hop, and the other is rap. So they are unique. They are truly challenging. And when people look at hip hop lyrics or rap lyrics, it can be overwhelming and cause anxiety, especially if you're thinking about how to sign those. So personally, I am so motivated and excited by that challenge. I say, bring it on. So I'll tell you my approach. And how many of you watched The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air? I think a lot of us grew up watching that show. So funny. With Will Smith on TV, and I think a lot of us grew up with that. If you're watching it, when there's some things you might not understand, like if they're, Mary, jump in if you catch some things. So when they're at the playground and climbing the jungle gym and on the swings and whatnot, there's such expressive ways to show those activities in ASL. So if you think about this, we're not using or spelling big vocabulary words. We're giving visual images, right? So there's a word chillin', right? Or maxing. So what does that mean? You know, there's ways to sign those concepts, those English words. Chill doesn't mean being cold, right? It probably means hanging out and when things are cool. But so we have to think carefully about how we're translating those concepts to music. And we have a different sign for chill in music. I was just doing with the two C's. So, you know, we have different cultural references. We reference some things from the culture that influence the sign language and so forth. So I might sign something like what I just did. So here's about 7 different ways of showing chill, right? So we're certainly not doing a literal translation of being chilly. And then there's not just one sign for chilling out. If someone's playing basketball, say near the school, You can think about some of the slang, some of the metaphors, and there's such creative ways to play in ASL. Here's making a shot, and I
use like a facial expression that is indicative of what Michael Jordan used to do when he played, just kind of really trying to emulate somebody who is shooting hoops.
right. And if you think about Kobe, you know what? How would he look? You know, maybe dumping the ball in a trash can. So they're cultural references that when we embody them in sign language, people might think back to something like the Fresh Prince or a famous basketball player and what they look like. There's a sign for bless, right? You might say, thank God for another day, or don't hate on me, or an expression like that. So if you sign hate in ASL, it's really a strong word. That's not really what don't hate on me means. So there would be a different way to interpret that concept that would be more accurate. Doesn't mean don't talk negative about me. There's a lot of creative ways. Like maybe you're talking about somebody succeeding, you know, don't hate on me, don't criticize me for my success. So there's a Praise the Lord by, is it ASAP Rocky?
ASAP Rocky.
ASAP Rocky. So you really need to do your homework. You can't just jump in blind and start shining the music and know everything. You've got to be motivated and put the work in required. You're not just going to be professional right off the top, right off the beat. With rap and hip hop, there are so many metaphors, and you have to analyze the text and think about the cultural references. If they're talking about rat, cat, dog, you have to know what they mean. They're not necessarily talking about the animal, like, hey, cat. They're not talking about a kitty cat. In jazz, if they're talking about the backstabbers, you know, what does a rat mean? It means a snitch. So if you're trying to sign this song, you're not going to sign cat like a kitty cat. When there's cat in the music, it might mean a woman. If they say dog, I might sign this. So if you're signing jazz, rat, cat, dog, like those literal one-to-one corresponding ASL signs, you don't have the meaning right. So I just signed those same words using metaphor, giving the correct meaning. There's other words that you might see, like festival or chorus, depending upon the environment. People might sign, like, if you're from Atlanta, Georgia, there's a song called Don't Rip Too Hard, Drip Too Hard.
Don't drip.
So if you're signing water dripping from the sink, that would not be accurate. It's a metaphor. It's slang. Drip actually means enjoy yourself. Maybe you're working so hard, you're sweating. So I might sign it this way. So the same kind of concept with ice. If someone has ice, how would you sign that? If you're walking around with ice, you're not going to sign ice like the frozen ice from your freezer. Maybe you have to think about how it means in that song. Maybe somebody's shining. Maybe somebody's so bright with their bling that you're saying they've got ice, right? So you really have to understand the meaning, the context. There's a song, Been About It. So what does that mean? It means something's been true for a long time, something solid. So solid has a specific meaning, and it depends on the context. So that means if you call me and I'm solid, you know how I'm going to answer. You know what to expect from me. You need me to take care of something, I'm going to take care of it for you. We're solid. And if you say been about it, it means I'm solid. I've been about it. So you really need to realize that language comes from people's experience. People experience language deprivation. People haven't been exposed to sign, exposed to English. And when someone says been about it, it means you've been solid. Or it means I want to be sure of you. So true. So you have to understand this context and then choose the right signs. I remember one line from another song. There were two young folks, I think in Atlanta, they were causing trouble out on the street and there were sirens. They heard the police and everyone got nervous. And so they use the word shock, and it's not like giving you an electric shock. It means I got a shock. It means I was anxious that the cops are going to pull me over. So you have to think conceptually. You have to use conceptualization, or the meaning will be totally skewed and inaccurate. So when you're signing hip hop, you need cultural awareness, cultural knowledge. If you just look at the words and think you understand them and you're going to sign what they say literally, you're definitely going to miss the point. You have to really get in there and understand the metaphors and do your homework. I want to add something as well. When you're thinking about language, if somebody's laughing hard or at a barbecue in the yard, what does that look like? Right? You have to visualize people sitting all around playing cards, playing spades. How does it look when you hold the cards? How does it look when you slam one down, when you got the winning card? How does it look when they're playing the music, right?
That's barbecuing.
What do things smell like? You have to envision the whole environment and make people feel like they can dive in and be there too. Another example would be
Trip.
for a trip. What do you think that means?
It's a different kind of
It's
slang.
it's slang. It might mean that if you're tripping, you might be making a sale, you might be selling stuff to survive. You might be selling some things illegally. You might sign something like this. That's an example of the slang. Here's some other signs. Fire. We talked about ice. I covered that already. The meaning might be the opposite of what you think. What about creeping? They're creeping. What do you think that means? It means they're going slowly in the car down the street. They're creeping along real slow. That's creeping. So, if you're acting like on Broadway, we see different actors on Broadway and in films. There's often a director of ASL called a dazzle. So this role can be applied to music too. You need a dazzle to help you understand some of that slang, to give you the culturally appropriate signs so that you understand what's going on and you're using signs that match your audience. If you want true communication access, you have to convey the meaning that you want, not just use the signs that you think are right without any in-depth analysis. What do you think comes first, understanding culture or giving access? If you say they both need to happen at the same time, then that's a win-win situation. You can't just pick one. So this is food for thought for y'all. So thank you for joining me. And I've covered a whole range of topics. I'm really happy to be supportive and helpful and to give you more knowledge. I'm not keeping the doors closed. I am open for discussion. Please feel free to ask during the live Q&A. All right. Take care, y'all.
Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much. That was amazing. And I think the overall emphasis of access and culture together, making sure that we get accurate, conceptually accurate translations of text. And I think folks in the program, we have decided that we actually want to get our friend there to come and actually teach on that topic, to talk about clarity and interpretation and making sure we have cultural matching references. So if please, we want to utilize all of the skill sets that we have out there. So now I would like to welcome Matt. And if you have any questions, we will definitely spotlight you so you can frame your question, or if you prefer to put it in chat, that's fine as well. And here we go. Thank you so much. I was really nervous, but I'm so glad that it worked out the way it did. And just watching you, I think the pace of your signing throughout your presentation was perfect. It was totally spot on. And it wasn't like I had a struggle to keep up and understand the concepts. You were paced very well and you built on the concepts as you went through.
Yeah, that's really key. You know, often when I go to different schools to present and give workshops, I've learned how to interact with the audience, how to pace things correctly. In an educational setting, it's so important for people to understand. And of course, if I sign too fast, they're going to miss the main elements, and that's really no good. So I really try hard to sign in a way that folks will really get my point.
It's nice. You were actually able to get that rhythm for deaf folks to really understand it. So really, really well done.
Thanks so much.
Let me double check and see if we have any questions. One of the questions here is, if there are interpreters who are beginning in the field, what advice would you give them as far as if they wanted to put a focus on music? Where should they start? Any ideas?
I would definitely recommend, if you see an agency or people or a company, that you work in partnership with them and ask them maybe if you could be an intern. You know, you can practice signing at home, you can practice in the shower, you can practice in the classroom. But if it's really a festival or a show or a concert, you don't want to take on something like that if you're not ready. I mean, my philosophy is I don't want to put people on the hot spot who don't have experience. I want to set people up for success. So I would suggest getting your feet wet through maybe an internship and learning from those who are more skilled. And then I think over time, you know, you'll develop the skills to be able to do it.
I wanted to make sure that we had the interpreter gave them the opportunity to finish, but just kind of going back, you mentioned about setting people up for success, and I think that's great.
Right. There are no closed doors.
And I think that's a great point. You don't want to just throw somebody into the deep end right off the get-go. You want to make sure that they have the opportunities to develop those skills and then in turn pass them on to those coming after them.
I agree.
Oh, I think there's some more questions. Bear with me just a second. Now, you did explain a little bit about like a workshop, but this is something that you were teaching. Do you work with young children at all? I think it would be kind of cool if you had this type of workshop with younger children, maybe say 3 or 4 or 5 years old.
I've worked with elementary school kids, deaf and hearing. I visited the American School for the Deaf. I worked with teachers about how to sign certain songs, and I worked with New York School for the Deaf in Fanwood, and I've also worked with California School for the Deaf in Fremont. So I have been around and I have had experience working with young folks. Most of the time, I, you know, I really want language access to be best for everyone. And the more I teach, the more I learn how to accommodate all different ages from elementary school, middle school, high school to adults. And I learn how to scaffold and, you know, tailor my lesson to the right group. I really love doing workshops with children. I love teaching folks to understand language and all of the different ways that you can sign things. And folks who are deaf and hard of hearing, if they like music, they don't have to be shy about it. You know, if you don't like music, that's cool. But if people want to enjoy music, we should be collaborating and giving them access.
I'm looking for, opportunities. Like you said, you're checking out the different audiences and different age ranges and try and figure out what their preferences are and meet them where they are. That's great. And you've been all over the place, both the East and the West Coast.
Yeah, for sure. And every experience is unique and so wonderful for me.
That's awesome. You know what? Let me look at the next question. I think this is an interesting one. Do you can include Black ASL, excuse me, BASL into your process at all? And how do you do that?
So, a technical explanation of BASL, you know, I I think that that's not exactly the right term for music. When we're talking about slang and how to sign terms for slang, do I call that BASL, Black ASL? I don't think that's always the right label, but I think that most people say being culturally appropriate. So if you're talking about hip hop or rap, there's some things that might be said more often in the Black community. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. But the point is to understand the meaning. For a deaf audience, when I go to festivals and shows and things, sometimes I'll talk to the deaf folks there and I say, what do you prefer? And, we want to see authentic representation, authentic interpretations. We want to know that the person that's signing understands the culture and that they're not watering things down and minimizing the complexity and the beauty in the language. And in rap and hip hop, we are becoming so much better at giving an authentic interpretation. So I wouldn't say you've got to interpret in Black ASL. I think there's folks from different backgrounds and folks from different races. Sometimes you might think the interpreter is not the right match for an assignment, but when they pick up their hands, you understand that they really get it, that they studied and they've made fantastic linguistically appropriate interpretations with metaphor and rhythm. So it depends.
Knock it off!
You know what? I think you bring up a great point. You really do. And also, I mean, in a sense, for a second there, I thought we were talking British Sign Language because that's BASL as well, BSL as well. But excuse me, there's somebody who has a hot mic. If you could close your
Yes,
mic.
can somebody go into the participants and turn mute on people who don't have themselves muted?
Yeah, make a right.
Just trying to make sure that we're able to get everybody muted because it's interfering with the acoustics.
Yeah, Yuru, maybe you can help with that, muting people whose mics are on.
Okay, so the next question that we have in the chat, and I know that there's obviously this is going to depend on the song or the genre, as you mentioned. But you're talking about a process of actually looking through the song and analyzing the song. Can you give us, an example of what you might do?
Sure. Well, depending upon the song and depending upon the genre of the music. Suppose it's sort of telling a story, right? You really got to show it. Maybe it's old school hip hop. Maybe, what's the feeling of the song? Sometimes it's a little slower, more simpler to follow. Sometimes it's easier to be creative. But if it's more current music, the rap today is challenging. There's so much creativity put into the words. Sometimes it's offbeat. It's hard to keep up with. So I don't memorize that as well as I used to, the lyrics and everything from the 80s to like 2010. That was a little bit easier for me to memorize and sign those songs. More recently, I think things have gotten more challenging and people tackle that in different ways. I say if you have a friend or a group of friends you can get together with and talk about the meaning, the more conversations you have trying to unpack what the lyrics are about, the more feedback you get on the meaning and different sign choices, the better work you will produce. If I just do it on my own, it takes a lot longer, but when I collaborate with others, it can be really motivating. It can help me remember the lyrics better and it leads to a better result.
I think that feedback is always helpful. I think the idea of both creativity and clarity, and sometimes kind of talking it over with yourself and maybe even somebody else, that might be advisable. Okay, the next question has to do with rhyme and the idea of incorporating that into your interpretation sometimes. And how do you bring that piece of music into your interpretations? Jess, we can switch over if you want. It's up to you.
I really struggle with rhyme because that's English based, it's sound based. So when you have a deaf audience, I don't want to assume that they're going to catch a hearing rhyme. So I'm always thinking about accessibility and clarity of the message. If you understand the message, it will help a person like that song. Sometimes someone will say, "What's the name of that song?" And then they can research it online and find all the lyrics on their own and see what the English says. But I'm working on so many different things at the same time. So you can't account for everything. You can't always show rhyme. You can't always show the metaphor. But I'm thinking about rhyme and metaphor and rhythm and all these things at the same time. And as much as possible, I'm trying to put them in my interpretation. But it depends who's interpreting. You've got to try your best. And then also tell the deaf people what the name of the song is. They could do their homework. They can build up their knowledge so that they can have more of a connection to the piece of music.
Absolutely. And I could imagine the overall process of trying to incorporate the feeling and the rhyme and the lyrics and everything all together can be sometimes overwhelming, and really trying to figure out what the heart of the song is and how you want to represent that.
Right, and it's really important to think about who the audience is. Are they big fans of this music, or are they audience members who don't really care about it so much? If they're people who really love the music, then maybe you want to share more of that rhyme with them because they'll know what's up. They'll know the songs.
Absolutely. And there was actually a question from earlier that I missed, and it had to do with slang. And how can you find better resources to help you work through that process, whether it might be particular groups or, are there specific resources that interpreters or other performers might be able to avail themselves to be able to make better interpretation choices.
Well, I've talked for a long time about trying to set up a central resource where people could go to learn some of the slang. Maybe, if you look Genius site, there's not really a central resource to go to. I can't just recommend one place, but I guess, I've learned things from the community. I don't use Facebook much. I'm not much of a social media person. I like being with people in real life, people from the east, the west, the north, the south, just interacting with folks and having these discussions and learning from everybody. I think learning from real people is the best resource. And I I do sometimes watch folks online. There are people with such rich backgrounds and experiences that you might see some of that online, but when you meet people and talk to them, all of that goes into your toolkit. And there's some sort of unspoken, unwritten knowledge. You're not going to find it in a book. You'll find it by hanging out with folks and picking it up. Sometimes if you're stuck with a certain line or, you just ask somebody, gee, how would you sign this? Just be direct. We're not trying to be gatekeepers, like this is only slang for us. I'm not going to tell you what it means. I mean, I know for sure if someone would ask me, I can't speak for everyone, but I'd be happy to answer as best as I can. The more you know, the more everybody wins.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. Knowledge is power, right?
That's a fact.
You basically, I mean, you can learn lots of things from books, but that's not the be all and end all. You got to be around people in order to get things. I think the next question is in reference to elementary school music. Sometimes, children are mainstream these days. You have a deaf student, and oftentimes they would get waived from a music class. Should they do it? Should they not? That type of thing. And what type of accommodations do you think can be made to be able to, allow the deaf student to truly participate and enjoy and benefit from the class? We want them to feel included. And oftentimes deaf students will look, music class, why bother? How can we work towards making that better?
Wow, preparation. It's like when I see a live interpreted performance, if you got a set list 2 days before, or even 2 hours before, sometimes it's so last minute you can't prepare. But if you get it well in advance, you can really learn. Like you could teach kids, if you know what songs they're going to be signing, if you have plenty of time to teach them, it will make them so much more motivated, make them, if you're going to teach them about the song before they see it interpreted, perhaps it will help them connect more. The more they know, the more comfortable they are, the more familiar they are with music or a particular song. Sometimes kids are shy. They're like, everyone's going to look at me. I don't want to sign that song. But we want to empower kids. So maybe work one-on-one or two-on-two or small groups working together to accomplish a common goal. I think that can really be more inspiring, but it takes more than a day or two of prep, you know. So it's sort of hard for me to give you a definitive answer or solution to that because every classroom has different kids, every classroom is different, so it's not a one size fits all solution.
Well said. Good points. And I think that's one of the reasons that this program was set up 10 years ago, and really how to make musical education important for deaf kids again. And I think it's to make sure it's beautiful for everyone and to show the diversity of potential approaches for inclusion.
Yeah, by the way, congratulations, 10 years.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, big kudos.
And having you involved with us today is a beautiful way to celebrate that.
Thanks so much.
All right, we have maybe time for 2 more questions. All right, let's get this thread here. Up, I think they're having conversations with each other, not necessarily questions. There was a thing about YouTube and maybe using that as a resource, but let me see if I can spotlight our next question. Holly.
Hello there.
Oh, it's good to see you. Long time no see.
I don't really have a question. I just wanted to say that I am so proud of you. Oh my goodness. I remember seeing you in Jacksonville, Florida. It was so
Hi.
long ago. And you've come so far. It's just amazing.
Lots of changes for the better since then, and I've learned a lot.
Yeah, I mean, you've been going to schools and teaching. It's just, you've taught us so much.
Oh, thank you so much. And you know what? I remember when we met, you weren't signing all that well, and looking at you now, I don't know. I'm so glad to see you and also to see how you're signing. Keep it up.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye. I agree with you so much. We're so proud to have you in our community.
I mean, and I feel honored, I mean, I'm glad that we were able to get things squared away and kind of keep things moving.
I think Isabella had her hand raised. Let me
All
see if I can spotlight her.
Hey, Isabella, I see you. We actually just met.
At
Remember?
Fanwood, right? Yeah.
You know what? I thought so. I wasn't too sure. And I was like, I'm going to spell it just to be safe. I wasn't sure if that was the right sign or not. What's up?
If you're not sure, it's always best to just spell someone's name if you're not going to get their sign name right. It's so good to see you again. I'm
Absolutely.
Isabella. I'm an ASL instructor at Fanwood School for the Deaf. That's how the two of us met. And I'm so sorry I missed your whole workshop with the students. I saw you sign some stories, and it was just fascinating how well you engage with the elementary school kids. You're so charismatic. I really would love to see you give more workshops, and I was so happy to see your presentation today. Translation is not easy. I know. I totally agree with you. And I think, as an ASL teacher, I still want to get other people's perspectives on translating things, and like analyzing poetry with students. We really have to expand upon meaning and elaborate. And music's not my skill or knowledge area, but when I see you explaining the meaning of these words, it's so important that clearly that you have to have the right people involved in the process, people who have that content knowledge. And, the community can be really critical. If you sign a song, sometimes people will say, that's too English or that's too ASL. You've lost the point of the song. I don't know what the words are. You're just giving me the meaning. So it's hard to satisfy everyone. But your suggestions of dealing with that, I wonder about the translation process and how you satisfy different audiences.
You know what? I think that's a great point and wrapped in a good question. Just overall listening to music, not everybody hears it, quote unquote, the same, right? I think that's the whole point of artistic license and artistic access. And some people are going to kind of translate and match the interpretations one way or another. People experience frustrations and oppression, and nobody has that same experience. So I think, people might look and say, well, wait a minute, you're changing the words or changing something. It's like, well, wait a minute. You may have a deaf person who uses ASL more and they prefer to have more of that ASL translation, whereas somebody may be more English. So I think it is very individualized, and it's difficult to really kind of have that one size fits all interpretation. And you know what? I mean, I just put out what I can, and I'm proud with what I do, and just you give it your all. And I think, I've had my experience as a Gallaudet, and it was a little difficult at times, I will say, just given the variety of the community, and realizing the impact that you're having and the diversity of the community. That, we have folks who are deaf and hard of hearing, and people who can hear a little bit and like music and this and that. So I think overall, realizing that you're going to win some and lose some, and those that you lose, don't take it personally. I think there are so many other signers out there that may be a better fit for one thing or another. It's not a competition, right? And I think that's the thing that we need to keep in mind, and just adapt as we go through things, and do it together. I mean, it's not about, there is no I in team, right? We're all here doing this together. And hopefully I do my part the best I can.
Wow, that's really wise advice. It's a community, right? It's not about me. This is me. This is the best interpretation of this song. This is right. Not at all, It's been so good to see your presentation and hear all of your great advice.
Thanks. It's so good to see you again. Have a great day.
Yeah, that was really beautiful explanation, and how much you value traveling around and meeting different communities and raising the level of knowledge and adapting to your audience.
Definitely.
You've given us a lot to think about. I know one question people ask is, but that you're always thinking about is how to have a better experience for deaf children and how to have them be exposed to deaf musicians and, deaf artistry, and that will surely motivate them if they have people to look up to like you. So I just wanted to put that out there too and answer some of the other questions in the chat. And we look forward to seeing you perform a song.
Absolutely. I'm nervous, to be honest. I'm always nervous. But I think, when somebody is nervous, it shows that they care. So if you are always nervous, you always care. So that way, hopefully it kind of pushes forward the idea of me doing a better job. So we'll have a good job. We'll have a good interpretation. We'll have a good vibe, and everybody wins.
Yeah, and I hope that you enjoy the vibe from the audience here and that you feel that good energy flowing both ways.
Yeah, I mean, every time I come here to ASD, I think I've been here, 3 years running now? And it's always been amazing every single time.
This is like where deaf history in the United States began.
Exactly. They're like, we are number one, and they are quite proud of that, mind you.
Thank you again so much for coming. I hope that this is just the start of a collaboration and that we can amplify your work. And, you've given us knowledge to work with.
Please know that I am happy to support in any way I can, and in contribution. Thank you so much for inviting me today, for the invitation. And I'm around. If anybody comes up with any questions, I am more than happy to answer what I can. I look forward to it, actually.
Thank you so much. Let's give him a huge hand. And thanks for all of the questions from the audience and your answers. Let's let Matt take a break.
Thanks, guys. I'm going to turn my camera off.
That was just so wonderful. It was too short. I wish we could talk to you all day, Matt. So now we have Eric, and I'm so excited to see him. As a I know my things have changed a lot, and seeing how children learn and how they sign, and Eric is going to show us a videotape about how he uses signs to teach literacy, to teach reading and writing. So I'll share that now. Maybe you've seen some of his videos on social media, and if you haven't, I encourage you to check them out because they're super impressive. And so we are so fortunate to have these two panels here today.
I am thrilled to be here today with you. My name is Eric, and I really, really want to thank your teachers for extending the invitation for me to come here today with you. Now, you may be thinking, what's English? What's it all about, right? You're right. You know what? It is reading, and I love reading. You too? Oh, that's right. It is about writing as well. So English is about reading and writing. Good job. So this thing that I'm doing with my hands right now, what is that? What's that called? Exactly. American Sign Language. You guys are doing great. That's awesome. So wait, reading and writing is English language, and doing sign language is American Sign Language. Wow, we're going to think of some poems here. Okay, what's this? Oh, what is that? It's a bug. B-U-G. Now in ASL, there's a hand shape for this. You know what? Let me show you. It looks like this. Huh. So that's a bug. If you see, it has eyes, right? And if you think of this, it's representative of the eyes. Just do it with me. You see how the bug has these big bulging eyes? But wait a minute, he also has a body. And if you look at this hand shape here, he's got this body with all these bumps and whatever's it. He's got the eyes. He's got this really ripply, weird, squishy kind of body. So he's got these eyes. And what does he do with them? Right? These are his eyes. And then he has this body. And you notice how the signs for each one are different. Now you notice he also has these things on the bottom, right? And those are called feet. And they look like this. So now we're going to do them, put them all together. See what the bug looks like? He's hungry. He's looking for leaves or something to eat. Let's do it again. Do it with me now. That video is a great way to teach English to young children, and it's using ASL rhymes and hand shapes. The rhyming is with the hand shape, not necessarily the audio version. And it really captures the student's attention and helps them go through that process and bank those English words and concepts. So in this case, it was eyes and bugs and feet. And the children are going to learn that, and they're going to incorporate that via the ASL rhyme into their knowledge base, and it makes them eager to learn. Now, if children don't have enthusiasm or motivation to learn, it's not going to happen. And this type of teaching really works for deaf children. Now, also, I didn't come up with this myself. There was another gentleman who came up with this particular concept, and he was super well versed. He was teaching deaf children the two languages, and he went to all different types of schools for the deaf, mainstream, deaf schools. And honestly, I do encourage you to reach out to him as a consultant. Now, hearing children, when they grow up, they learn naturally English. They learn it through nursery rhymes, and the name is right there, rhymes. They hear the word, say like Dr. Seuss, for example, and it's like, dish and wish, and they make those connections because those words sound the same, and it captures hearing children's attention. They love hearing that rhythmical story, and they want to hear it again and again and again. And I think deaf children, it's the same concept. So if you do that book with, fish and dish and wish, deaf children look at it and are like, you know what? Not doing it for me. There's no visual connection there. There's no visual rhyme. It has to be made visual in order for deaf children to connect. So, I mean, the idea of taking Dr. Seuss and translating it into something with visual rhymes to help deaf children gain that attraction. I'm going to show it to you now. and you can look at the captions for the translations. What was just said, I mean, if you look at this, the rhyme for fish, wish, and dish, it was a hand shape and it looked like this. It was the movement. Here was your dish. Here was your fish. And it actually, that movement,
Yes.
the hand shapes are the same.
Half an hour.
Can we have a hot mic? If you could please mute yourselves. Now, again, you notice there are signs for English words for fish and dish. However, there was a new sign added that made it more visually appealing. Now, we added this new sign because it made it visual. It gave a visual rhyme component to the story. And it allowed the students to get enthralled by it. And then in turn, they wanted to do it with the teacher. You know, the sign for fish, and they see the word in the book, fish, and then they sign fish, but then they're signing dish, but then they start to make the connections with the concept. You can keep the English words in your interpretations, in your the readings of the story, but you want to include those other connections so that the deaf students can have a fuller experience. Now, there's different types of ASL rhymes that could be done via hand shape, via movement, but really what you're really hoping to get the attention of deaf kids with is body movement, whether that be your overall gentle shifts, facial expressions, head tilts, or whatever the case may be, you know, and actually Twinkle Twinkle Little Star this is an interpretation of it, and it shows rhyme and it really gets deaf kids involved. I wanted to show you the interpretation. And again, focus on the captions for the translations. That actually shows the rhythmical movement of it is actually showing how ASL rhyme happens via body movement. So you see the two words star. Now they are the same sign in English, in which case it's represented by the same body movement, the same head tilt. And you're showing the glittering of the star, but you're using your body movement. You're using your body to show you looking at the star from different angles. So you're using the rhyming in English to connotate the actual rhythmical movements of the signs. Now, rhymes definitely help deaf kids pay more attention when you're doing this, but also think of it if you watch a movie, right? And you have a particular character and you take on the overall body movements or the posture of that character. So say we're going to the rhythmic thing, hey diddle diddle. Wanted to give you an example of how you could do this using this fairy tale and watch the translation through the captions. Again, it's made visually interesting. It's a nursery rhyme put into ASL. And I think this is something that requires a lot of skill. And oftentimes hearing parents who are signing with their deaf children don't have that skill. You have to utilize a professional, somebody who has experience with that in order to get that skill to allow your deaf children to really get involved with a story. Now, unfortunately, a lot of programs don't have people who are trained in this visual art. I think there actually are individuals that have, or places that give courses to help make visual adaptations to nursery rhymes and things like that. Now, the translations of English into ASL, that's not the best way to teach. Just a suggestion, what you can do is you can actually start in ASL and utilize that to incorporate those concepts into your English work. So if you have an ASL rhyme, and if you're teaching it to deaf children, you could utilize the vocabulary from English, let's just say a noun or a verb, and you could put it out in ASL, and then in turn it becomes visual, and the deaf children will look at it and be able to make those connections between the sign and the word. And here's your video. That was great because it really shows a visual representation of the words, and the kids are going to remember how all of these different entities, the rat, the rooster, the bear, all of the gorilla, all of them do it differently, but yet they're all nouns and all of them are doing verbs. And they're going to watch that and say, well, wait a minute, the rooster is doing this, and that hand shape for showing the feathers on the top of his head and his feet, it's the same thing. And it's going to get them energized into continually wanting to learn. You can use you can use ASL to teach English words and word order. And here's an example.
Ending with, so look at all these amazing animals.
And I think this is how you can use rhymes to teach English. And I think if you think about ASL rhymes, you can utilize that. If you watch the signs that I'm using, I'm setting them up in opposite spaces, right? And here is an example. This again shows that you can teach antonyms utilizing your space. setting them up in opposite sides of space. Now you could also use it to teach comparisons, comparative adjectives. If you're going to say, all right, something is pretty, then you're going to shift to say, wow, this is prettier. And again, you're showing that the difference between the two words and the two concepts. Again, this video shows how you can utilize space to show the difference between comparative adjectives. Next, we're going to learn about how to teach sight words. Now, you know, sight words oftentimes are very difficult to visualize, like in, on, into. Those are very difficult to visualize, to translate into a visual modality. Now you can use ASL to show those things. We'll use in, out, and into, for example. And see how it would apply to any given situation. Once that concept is understood, then you can move on to the next. Let me show you what I mean. Those are just some creative ideas to use when you're teaching sight words. Now, in conclusion, hopefully you've learned that you can utilize ASL rhyme when you teach English. You want to make it visually engaging for your students, for them to be able to incorporate the ideas and then in turn be able to translate that into their English studies. Now, if you're looking to learn how you can incorporate and learn these signs, I actually have an online course. I also suggest that you reach out to Terry Lynn Sacchetti. She actually has a world of experience doing workshops, working with young children. Thank you very much.
Wow. Let's just get the view correct here. Oh, that was so wonderful. Outstanding and exciting. This Monday, he'll be giving a workshop at St. Francis School for the Deaf, right?
Yeah, so
we-
I'm sorry, it'll actually be the first time working with, and again, if you have any questions or looking, Terry Lynn Cicchetti has a wonderful curriculum, and she's worked a lot with young students. And I think, I'm going to be utilizing a lot of the techniques that she has used before. She is amazing. I'm going to be using a lot of that in St. Francis's. So I think oftentimes we don't utilize ASL in teaching English a lot. And I think the curriculum that Terry Lynn has set up is brilliant. And I almost, I wish she could be here to kind of go into it. And again, it's terrylynn.com if you have any questions.
It reminds me of what Matt said about the importance of apprenticing with a master and becoming a master yourself. Last night at St. Francis, there was a performance, there was a music video. Well, there's going to be, and I also look forward to seeing what they do next year. Isabella's raising her hand, and there's some questions in the chat too. Isabella first? I'll take this.
Gotcha.
Oh, wow, Eric, that was so wonderful. I teach at the American School for the Deaf, and I work with Barbara as well. And she's a bilingual coordinator and at Fanwood. And I know Terry Lynn because we studied together. Your presentation was really right on. That's the right message. It's so important to expose children to ASL first, and then to be teaching them English in a parallel process. And especially at a young age, like pre-K, teachers are often so focused on English to the exclusion of ASL. And I think when they get older, if they've missed that opportunity to learn about things in space, like the dog on the car and so forth, if they understand the concepts right, then they'll use the classifiers correctly. So it's so important to have the sign foundation and to use ASL in school, even with pre-K classrooms. I use that as well. And I'm a native signer. And so I just have that, within me. And it's important to transmit that knowledge. If a deaf school has deaf professors, people who are native ASL users who use their skills, or, in a mainstream school, if they don't have the right person to contact, there are resources. There aren't enough resources. I personally struggle, to find all the resources, and I hope that students will learn a lot from me, but they need to understand people with different styles of signing as well. And there's so much language deprivation from this lack of exposure to fluent deaf signing adults. And it can be really challenging to find resources. A lot of people are asking that question, where's a central basis for all of this knowledge? There isn't enough. And so I wonder what your thoughts are about what you would suggest about exposing people to different signers and different curriculum.
Well, I think it does depend on the curriculum that you're using, right? I think that there is a program that they're going to be videoing young deaf children, so that'll be a resource. There's another school for the deaf that has like young translations of books for young children, so that might be an option as well. Right now, utilizing Zoom, I think it is much easier to kind of share those information. For example, me working with St. Francis, I'm able to utilize Zoom to be able to work with them as opposed to flying in. So I think, yes, obviously resources are a problem, but I think also the research that is out there for people who have bilingual backgrounds and bilingual literacy skills, I think it is not necessarily consistent. But for me, Dr. Ruth Ann, I did not catch the last name. There is actually, she's worked with kids, and it's more middle school, a little bit older, not necessarily elementary, but I think that you have to get kids motivated, right? You have to get them motivated into wanting to learn. And they're like, oh, wait, they oftentimes, if there's a movie or something that they're motivated to watch, you have to do the same thing with reading. You have to get them interested. And it can't just be, oh, these cute little hand shape. It actually have to incorporate the rhyme and make their eyes light up. You want to be able to see that. And I think we look at it oftentimes and go, well, that's common sense, right? But it doesn't necessarily ring true for some. And I think there are, individuals that are doing teacher tours to different schools for the deaf. And I think you want to see if you can take advantage of those skill sets. There's also a lot of online courses that you might be able to use and utilize. So I think one of the big thing as a teacher is taking an ASL music class. And it just really realize why English is so hard, that you want to be able to really get a constant measure. English music, if you think about it, has 3/4 time and this and that. You want to be able to kind of emulate that with, signing. If you think about the Bison song from Gallaudet, right? And then about halfway you lose interest and you're like tall and short and this, it just screws up the rhythm of the song. And again, but mind me, it's not a criticism of the song or the community, but it's just, it has its musical moments. But it's not necessarily labeled as music. It's an interesting perspective, and just looking at it. I think also you see there's another group, and if you see some of the music that they do, you can actually see that their musicality is spot on. And and you could say, oh, they're beautiful, and it's more, and it truly matches the beat. It's not necessarily indicated like with rhythm 1, 2, 3, and 4. They're showing the timing, and that's really the piece of it that works. And I think that's the thing that we need, the thread that we need to pull through when we talk about this type of education, like with the music and the count. And again, there's a whole host of perspectives. And we could probably talk about this all day and all night, but seems like you have a follow-up question.
Yeah, and changing perspectives, we need to acknowledge that and look at more current resources as well. But we are certainly lacking in resources. Sometimes you have to find the right person. Sometimes I create resources myself, and that takes up a lot of time. You know, I see teachers struggling with teaching language, and sometimes people will video themselves, or I'll video myself, and people come to me as a resource all the time. And because these materials aren't as widely available. And I hope that that improves, and that it's a lot of work finding resources for using ASL to teach literacy.
Yeah, and there is a quote unquote, I believe it's called Firefly curriculum. You can definitely reach out to them and get that information.
Thank you, Isabella. The first year panel, people were talking about things that influenced our perspective, and things have really taken off since then. This conference really, it makes me feel like we should set up a deaf music school. We should have a deaf center. So there's some questions in the chat. I think that most of us have a lot of these questions on our mind, like how do you modify things to address language deprivation?
Yeah, and Taraline had told me, she goes, make sure that you don't water it down. You want to make sure that you are encompassing all the intricacies and detail that is there in the original text or the original picture. And you're looking at the picture of the bug, you want to get the incorporation of the eyes and the body and the every piece of it, and make it just as rich. And that in turn will cause motivation for your students. It makes it challenging, I'm not going to argue, but I think if you make it more visual and be able to give them examples that they will in turn be able to apply to their everyday reading and literacy, they will gain more for that, and they'll be able to use it going forward, making those
Making
connections.
connections with different characters and different patterns, and playing with the language. You did answer another question that was in the chat. Maybe you want to say more about it, about finding resources. Maybe you can just summarize that.
The Rocky Mountain School for the Deaf, they actually have a child's hands land. In another one, they have a 3 videotape series. You can purchase that. And I think there's someplace I think it's the New York School for the Deaf. I'm not sure, but one of the teachers does something with hand shapes, and it's like, two people walking alongside each other and I don't know, but there are videos out there, and there's another one.
CSD, maybe?
Yes. I do believe that's also a resource, but
Their
they're
early childhood center, yeah.
yes, and nothing without language. I mean, there are translations of children's books, but there is some ASL work in particular that is done to make those bilingual connections, and oftentimes where, how bilinguals manage both languages and to make sure that that the information is in the translations.
Let's see, I saw another couple of questions about the process of connecting ASL with English or teaching the patterns of English structure. I don't know if you want to make any comments about that process.
I would definitely prefer to make referrals for that.
There's a question related to English grammar and the age of students. Maybe talk about early elementary up to maybe first, second, third grade, what you would recommend.
So I think it would almost work backwards, right? You would think about what is your goal? I mean, I'm thinking with elementary school, you don't necessarily focus so much on grammar. You focus on what's the beginning of the thought and the end of the thought. What is it look?
Comprehension.
All right.
Is this claim supported? Do the subject and verb agree?
The tree falls or something like that, and kind of make sure that there is that flow. So I think that is the primary for elementary curriculums. Now, in an ideal world, you would, with maybe rhythm, and you would work also focusing on vocabulary, right? And then you would make those connections and allow them to make that physical connection with written word, and then incorporate the grammar there, like the dragonfly flies or something like that.
Or many rabbits, and then that's why you put an S at the end.
And then you could use a lot of like teaching, like points in the sense. Say there's actually ideas about capturing colors. And you want them to actually see, all right, well, this is the English word, the, and it follows the hand shape, in this particular case, pointing at it, something. And I feel like I'm a little bit all over the place with this, but I think the Hawaii School for the Deaf, they did a study where they were trying to teach nouns or the concept of nouns, and wound up what they did was they had like a sit down story time with an ASL story time with no English glossovers. And it was great. And they're like, all right, what did you touch? You touched the glass. That's great. And then, oh, wait, you went over to the computer. And then, did you touch happy? Well, wait a minute, you can't touch happy. So the children got to understand the idea of physical nouns versus emotional nouns or something like that. And that was done in ASL. And then in turn, they were like, all right, well, can you touch a phone? And the children would answer yes or no. Can you touch run? And they would be like, no. So once they got through that lesson, they understood the concept, right? And I mean, oftentimes everybody's dealing with language deprivation. Now, when they transferred it up, when the English teacher came, same classroom, they did the exact same thing. Well, can you touch a phone? And they would incorporate the written word on the board. So that allowed the students to make those connections. And so when the student wanted to answer, the teacher would say, write it down. She wouldn't ask them to not show it in ASL. She would ask them to write it down. So they were making that correct connection. Say, all right, well, this is a noun. I mean, if you go, this is a noun and this is a noun, that's not going to work, right? you want to be measuring things and figuring out how they are working, how their brains work, and make sure that they visually understand it, and then make those written or other types of literacy connections.
Yeah, that's really nice. I noticed a video that had sometimes the letter in red, or certain words sort of introducing one thing at a time to make comprehension, it happens incrementally.
I think oftentimes children, they look at a sentence and they see all these letters, and they don't necessarily make the connections, and they, you don't, ASL linguistics is not watering anything down. I think, people oftentimes think that, if you teach ASL, you're watering it down. In reality, that's not the case. You want to make sure that you're teaching it in one modality, in one language, and then being able to make those connections with English language. And that is what really will make those connections.
We're so lucky to have both of you on this panel and all of the work and analysis you've done and all the things that you've taught us. Let me just see if there's another question in the chat. How do you sign simple picture books and what they mean? Ones that don't have a lot of language, but the pictures have such rich meaning. How would you sign that sort of book?
Kind of what Matt said, like make it into a visual component. So, like put it in a physical plane for them and be able to use like a video. There's a in-depth workshop on classifiers upcoming. I think it's this Saturday. And it's truly, ASL linguists say, do not, or research say, just practice, go through it, work through it, just like what Matt kind of said, play with the language a little bit and kind of come up with those conceptual meanings and work on it. There's not necessarily a guideline. You must do A, B, and C. I think it's, try and really think of what the words or the meanings behind the words are conceptually, and there's no specific recipe for it. I think, maybe if I was going to show you a girl, well, you're showing the bonnet and I'm going to shut up now because I could go on for this forever, but I think there's a lot of powerful ASL linguistics things that you could utilize, but you find the approach that works best for you. It really can be a beautiful thing if you become the character and you make it work.
Yeah, I really agree with that. The visual vernacular, making the ASL cinematographic, there's no linguistic limit. It's just skill limits, right? But this artistry exists within the language. And as we learn and develop and are teaching patterns, I hope we see more of this work develop. There was one more question. Let's see. Someone was asking about phonics. They have hard of hearing students in the classroom and deaf students, and they're learning phonics, and some of them are learning speech, and the parents want them to do that. And so it's, how do you incorporate deaf and hard of hearing students in the classroom when teaching phonics?
Now, are your students fluent spellers already, or?
Maybe the person who asked that question, you can answer that. Shauna says, no, they're just like 3 to 5 year olds. They don't spell well yet.
I wouldn't necessarily worry about that. I think with syllables and things like that, I wouldn't concern yourself with it.
I guess maybe have small groups in learning to match their needs if some can hear phonetics or not until they have more of literacy skills like learning to spell. Then phonics becomes more understandable. And someone is saying, if you're telling the same story over and over again, would you use the same signs when you tell read the same book?
If you're trying to teach specific signs, specific English words, yes, you want to be able to be consistent with the signs that you use. Do not change them up every time.
I wouldn't have thought about that. That's good advice. Well, it looks like our time is just about up. I have a question I've had in mind. I don't know if you can give an in-depth answer at this time, but with the team that you've been working with and the research, um, I wonder what you would like to see in this field of research. What kind of evidence should be out there to make the sorts of change in curriculum that are necessary? Oh, and I think Isabella also had a question. Hold my question. Let's have Isabella here and let me spotlight her. Okay. Oh, great. Because you were just talking about finger spelling, and a lot of students avoid finger spelling. Um, so one thing I would say is there is a finger spelling program and materials ready, I think at different age levels, kindergarten through, they'll teach like spelling Batman, and there are resources out there. That's another one that you should be aware of. Maybe someone can type that in the chat. And also teaching the rhythm of finger spelling, you know, bus, just like teaching things with a rhythm and including finger spelling in that, like BUS, and then showing the bus moving along. I think students are more interested that way, and maybe this is a tool we should develop for children with language deprivation, but I wonder what your opinion is to use teaching finger spelling as well with the younger kids.
I think as long as you're incorporating that with language as well, if you do bus, as long as you're showing the sign or the movement for that sign at the same time, I think that would be fine, because you're able to incorporate finger spelling, because you want to make sure you incorporate and make all of those connections, both with the sign and the concept, as well as the letters that go along with it. Especially for children who are language deprived, you want to make sure, I think there are some students that you may want to focus more on the signs versus the actual finger spellings. Like I mentioned about the Hawaii School for the Deaf, I think they focused primarily on allowing the students to come up with those visual ideas first and then make the connections later.
You mean in terms of not watering things down?
I think with Terry Lynn, I think her examples from some of the videos that I've seen, and in her videos, there was one particular one, she was concerned about it and with a bug, and she did not finger spell. I mean, for me, I chose to finger spell selectively. But I think, and that's the pre piece of it. I think, you could do the visual vernacular all by itself and then introduce finger spelling later. It doesn't necessarily have to be at the same time.
Right, it's so good to see you. And one more thing that Eric was saying is it's more important to know that a dragonfly is a bug than how to spell the word dragonfly. Well, it's almost 11:40. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but maybe Matt, do you want to come on screen and maybe you could give our audience some takeaways? I had a question about research, but we have more just regular teachers here in our audience. And so what are some things you want to leave everyone with? I don't know. Is Matt still with us on the Zoom? Yes. Wonderful. Thank you for sticking with us, Matt.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I was watching Eric's presentation. I learned a lot. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I was learning from you too. And in terms of, talking about words like rat and stuff, you have to understand the song. You can't just think, oh, that means the animal rat. No, often in context, it doesn't.
Absolutely. I think, we each have our lanes, right? You start in one lane and then hopefully you navigate into another. So
Yeah, looking back, I wish that we had these resources from the beginning. We had so many years
I'm
of
with
trial
you.
and error.
You know what? It was an honor to have both of you here today. And I really hope this starts a conversation that will continue going forward. And I look forward to seeing the two of you and what you're doing actively out in the community. And I very much look forward to that. Thank you.
Thanks again for inviting me. I enjoyed it so much. Yeah, it was wonderful to be here.
Anything you want to do? Have any final parting thoughts? Any words of wisdom you want to leave with us? I think I've said my piece. I mean, I think there's a lot of information we talked about today and lots to kind of ruminate and think about it. And again, it was an honor to be here today, and I hope to be able to see some of you in person and maybe, get together and hang out or whatnot. But I think the organization that you're working with here are great. And I think overall, you're making a true impact on deaf kids and as they go into their higher education, whether it's Gallaudet or elsewhere. I think, that teaching and learning just continues wherever they go.
Yeah, this workshop was really helpful. It was helpful for me to see Matt's perspective. And I really like all of the creativity and how you can remove yourself from the written word and just go for meaning. And then, it's so important to hear these different kinds of perspectives and approaches. There are so many resources in English. We have these libraries. You can study about metaphor. You can study about all of this, but where are all of these resources for ASL? People say, oh, you should develop this, you should develop that, but no one's really doing it. So events like this help mobilize us and help get the enthusiasm up. I have my at sign playing resource, and people are always asking for more. And I try to direct people to my resources. I hope that they'll be using them. And then I hope that other people will develop more. Maybe, people need to see people of different signing styles. Matt might sign the things I sign a different way. And there's not just what you do with your hands, of course, right? There's the body and the facial expression and the body shifts. And so we need to see lots of different models of language as well. Thank you so much.
I think wonderfully said. This is one of my favorite Saturday mornings of the year. It almost always is, just sharing ideas from a musical lens and a literacy lens. You would think that people wouldn't necessarily want to get up early on a Saturday morning, but as you could see, the numbers have grown and grown and grown. So I look forward to uploading this, so people can look at it and use it as a resource going forward.
Wonderful, wonderful.
You know what? We're going to stop the recording. And I invite the audience to kind of come up on camera and say thank you if you want to say any parting words or chat with our presenters, and that would be nice. So we're going to stop the recording right now.